Eruvin Daf Yud Aleph. Today's email comes to us from Adam Labato from Edgware, London. And he writes, I Baruch Hashem still haven't missed a day. We love Adam Labato. He's a great friend of the Daf. He says he hasn't missed a day since Baruch Daf Beis, and that is due to the power combo of your fantastic, clear, and engaging style of giving over the Daf. The MDY Chevra, which, by the way, today, the engine of our Shir, Yeshua Aaron Price, had a baby girl, Mazel Tov. And of course, the need to fulfill the Yomi Rabboisai. Please join us. We have close to 3,000 people that tune in every single day to the full Shir, not the 8 minutes, the full Shir. It's fun, it's exciting, it's geschmack, the whole Chevra, the whole thing is great. Come join us. So, in the first mission of Eruvin, we learned the idea of Tzuras HaPesach. If you have something that looks like a door jamb, like a frame, that could help us where you have a mavi that's way too wide, it's more than 10 amas, and the mavi is puzzle. If you put a Tzuras HaPesach, it works. What about if a mavi is too high, more than 20 amas, it's puzzle? What if you put a giant door jamb that's more than 20 amas? Perhaps that could work. The Gemara says, in fact, it does work. We had a similar halacha, a maltra. If you recall, flashing lights, something that catches your attention like a depiction of a bird's nest. We said that helps, that if it's way too high, more than 20 amas, you don't have to reduce it if you have something flashy. What if you put that on maltra instead of on top? You put it on the side. If you have a very wide opening to your mavi, more than 10 amas, you put it on maltra, flashing lights, a depiction of a bird's nest. So the Gemara remains in a suffix. In our Mishnah that says that Tzuras HaPesach works to reduce the width, Rav argues and says Tzuras HaPesach does not work. Says Rav Yosef, based on this Rav, I could deduce that if you have a chutzner that has many openings, Tzuras HaPesach won't work there. In other words, if it's parutz meruba la'imed, you have more open space and ear than you have standing walls, Tzuras HaPesach will not work. Why? Because Rav Yosef understands that the problem that a 10 amma gap creates is the same problem as parutz meruba la'imed. The Gemara says, in fact, they're two different problems, and I'll prove it to you. You have a situation where the open gap does not bother us. You have parutz meruba la'imed, and that is by pasib birois. As we discussed the other day, when Klal Yisrael oil regel and they brought animals, they needed to give their animals water. So Chacham instituted that you could do pasib birois. You make L shapes, 4 L shapes, each amma by amma wide, and even if you have an open gap of 10 ammas between the L shapes, you're considered in a Rosh Hashanah and you could draw water. You see a situation where this parutz meruba la'imed is way more open than closed, yet you're limited to 10 ammas. So you see they're not connected, those two halachas. Now there is a brisa that talks about this exact case, and it seems like Rav Yosef is right. Tzuras HaPesach doesn't work in a case where you have parutz meruba la'imed. Says Rav Kahana over there, that case, we're talking about openings that are damaged openings. Meaning, one example is that you don't have a true jam. It's a jagged jam, says Rashi. They removed stones. Another example is you don't have a top, you don't have a header. You only have the side jams and not the header. If a person took 4 poles, put them in the ground, and on top of the poles he put a vine. Now he's trying to create a Tzuras HaPesach through that. So Chacham said it is indeed a great mechitza for Klaim. In other words, Min HaTorah, you're not allowed to plant a vine together with vegetables, but if you have this mechitza, this invisible wall, on one side you can plant grapes, on the other side, vegetables is not a problem. What about Shabbos? Is this considered a good mechitza for Shabbos according to Rish Lakish? It is. According to Rav Yochanan, it isn't. Now what's going on here? What's the case? The Gemara says either we're talking about that this Tzuras HaPesach is wider than 10 amas, because if it's not wider than 10 amas, we know from our first mission that Tzuras HaPesach works. And Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rav that Tzuras HaPesach doesn't work on something that's more than 10 amas. Or the machlekes is in Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda brings the halacha of min hatzad. Min hatzad means that instead of putting the vine on the top corner of the pole, you lower it down. Now that doesn't look like a door jamb anymore. And the machlekes is whether or not we can still use that as a Tzuras HaPesach. On Shabbos, that is. Now, in Klayim, we're going to say that it's okay. The Gemara says, it's mashma that Rabbi Yochanan proved from Yeshua that if you take a vine and you pull it taut on 2 poles, Rabbi Yochanan, he did this in front of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said that if it's more than 10 amos, you cannot use it as Tzuras HaPesach, and if it's less than 10 amos, you can. So you see this idea that there's a difference between 10 amos and more than 10 amos. Now, obviously, that case was where they were min hatzad, was lower than the top of the pole. Why? Because the halacha is that dukranim, these are poles that you stick into the ground, even though they are more than 10 amos spread apart, they're still considered Tzuras HaPesach. The only reason why the first case is not Tzuras HaPesach is because they were lower than the top. The Gemara just gives us a few halachas concerning Tzuras HaPesach. Rav Chisda says that the wood has to be strong enough to hold a door. Not any door, but even the lightest of all doors, one made out of straw. Rish Lakish says you have to see that there's some sort of hinge. What's a hinge? Rav Avi says afkasa. It's like a piece of metal that's on the bottom of the door that goes into the ground. He tried to figure out, Rav Avia's son wanted to figure out if Rav Ashi held of this. And he asked Rav Ashi's Talmidim, did your Rebbe Rav Ashi say any halachas when it came to Tzuras HaPesach? And he said, no. This is a machlokes, and we passing like Rav Nachman, that Tzuras HaPesach, the top part of Tzuras HaPesach, does not need to touch the jams. The header doesn't need to touch the jams. And the biggest raya is, Rav Sheshes argues, the Gemara tells us a great story. Rav Nachman went ahead in the house of the Reish Galus, and he built Tzuras HaPesach that didn't touch, the headers didn't touch the jams. Rav Sheshes saw this, and he told the Shamish Rav Gad to go knock them down, and he knocked them down. Reish Galus' security came, they took Rav Gad and put him in jail. Says Rav Sheshes, Rav Gad, come out of jail. So they realized that he was sent by Rav Sheshes, and they took him out of jail. But the Gemara tells us an amazing thing. Later on, Rav Sheshes asked the question, does anybody, was halacha said in Tzuras HaPesach? And the answer was yes. Where? When it comes to a mezuzah, if you have a circular arch, a rounded arch, and you have 10 tfachim height by 4 tfachim width, and that's the amount that you need for mezuzah, but above that, it arches. The halacha is that according to everybody, you have to put a mezuzah there. The problem is, the header is not touching the jams, as you see in the picture. The red on top is not touching the red on the side. And the answer is, that you see, the halacha is like Rav Nachman, that the header does not need to touch the jams. Rav Sheshes realized he made a mistake, and he asked that they shouldn't say that they caught him on a mistake, let him admit it himself, and so it was. A few more halachas when it comes to these rounded circular headers. The halacha is that if you don't have 3 tefachim on the bottom, even though it's 10 tefachim high, or let's say you have 3 tefachim on the bottom, but it's low, and you have 4 tefachim width, certainly don't need a mezuzah. Where's the machlokes? The machlokes is where you have 3 tefachim on the bottom by 4, and then only after that it starts going on an angle, and you don't have the whole 10 tefachim 4 amas width. Do we say the concept of chagikim, that halachically you do an imaginary carving out of that space, and now you have 4 tefachim by 10 tefachim, or you don't say so? Rameir says you do, Chacham say you don't. Says the Mishnah, when we're dealing with a mavoi sasum, a dead end mavoi, according to Beishamai, you need both a lechi and a kaira. According to Beisil, one or the other. In the Mishnah, it's brought down Talmud Echad. The Gemara explains it's Reb Meir said in front of Rebbe Kiva that the whole machlokes is only from Daled Amis and more. Rebbe Kiva says not true. Beishamai and Beisil argue even less than Daled Amis. According to Beishamai, you could say that Midoraisa, all you need is 3 mechitzas in order to be over. If you go from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, you don't need 4. Rabbanan said you need the 4th one that you should be able to carry there. So it's a chumrah de Rabbanan. And according to Beisil, you could say, it's not muchach, but you could say that 2 mechitzas is enough to be over the Raisa, and Chachamim added a 3rd one in order for you to carry. In other words, have a 3rd wall and a little bit of a lechi. Have a wonderful day.